teaching.
Very good.
But like many women, I ended up focusing quite a lot on my family. I had 4 children.
Very
So
good.
teaching was wonderful in terms of being able to both work part-time and also focus on family.
Of course.
And I really enjoyed teaching, but I always felt like there was something else that I wanted to do. Or
excellent.
I always felt that as much as I very much enjoyed, particularly working with the children, but there was always a niggle in me, John, that I wanted to do something different. And then about 13 years ago, I went back and I did a diploma in coaching.
Very good.
And that had actually come from a friend of mine the previous year had been coaching me as part of her coaching diploma.
Very good.
During that time, during the coaching that I did with her, I discovered that I really wanted to write. And so that's when my writing career took off at the same time. And I found the coaching such a powerful model of communication and such a powerful way to create a space for people to really explore what it is that they were doing, that I decided it might be something I'd like to do in the future for myself. So I did the diploma, and then after a few years, I decided I'd make a go of it. And I had left the teaching at that stage. I've been doing some work within brand strategy, but I decided at that stage that I would take the plunge and work for myself.
Excellent response. And tell me, what were you like as a child?
I was the youngest of 4, three brothers and myself. So for the first part of my life, I thought I was a boy. I didn't realize I was a girl at all. We lived, in fact, I live in Drimna, but we lived in Crumlin in Dublin. And I'm 55 now, so I was a child of the 70s, really, John, and I was a real tomboy. Was well able to kick a football, well able to arm wrestle, and I think in a lot of ways it was a real privilege growing up with brothers. But a part of me also would have loved to have had a sister.
Of course, I have one sister and I have one brother. So yeah. And again, like yourself, I'd be a child of the 70s.
Yeah.
I think so much has changed in life. What did you teach? Did you teach in primary school or did you teach secondary school children?
So I was trained to teach secondary school, and my 2 subjects were English literature, and catechetics, which was at the time was religion. And I often thought I lost my faith in religion during that time, and I found my faith in literature and in words. Although I'd always loved reading as a child. We had no television when we were growing up. My parents' idea was that they would wait until their last child had turned 18 before we got a television, and I was their last child. So we grew up in a household of no television, and all our friends had television, which was you can imagine, was very interesting. So I was trained as a secondary teacher, and I taught in secondary for a few years, but then I taught in primary school, and I also taught adult education. So it's fair to say I've taught from 4 to about 70 was my range of students.
But growing up, were your parents keen that their 4 children would get a good education and go to university?
That's a good question. They were. I mean, my mom went as far as matriculation, and then she was working when she met my dad. She was working in the ESB, and at the time, of course, they had the marriage bar. So as soon as she got married, she had to give up work. And my dad left school. He left school really early. But he was such a well-read man.
Very good.
So by the time we came along, he was very clear that he wanted us to get the education that he hadn't got. But in fact, as I said, he was an incredibly articulate, intelligent man. So we all, bar my oldest brother, who went straight in to the same job as my dad. They worked in what at the time was post and telegraphs. So he worked with his hands. The rest of us went on to college.
Oh, very good. I understand what you're saying there. Yeah, mean, both my parents were keen that all three of us would go to university, which we did. But I studied accountancy and worked in accountancy for over 25 years.
Yeah.
And no more than yourself, Anne, I had this niggling feeling, I should say, that I wasn't quite in the right profession. And it took a compulsory redundancy and a chat with the HR director to confirm that I wasn't an accountant's accountant. And I'm glad I've moved away from that profession. But having said that, I think that the accountancy profession and qualification is a great business qualification. And I would never regret having done the exams, but I just didn't have the accountant's mindset, I suppose you could say.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's very true.
Yeah.
And I think for some people, even if they haven't, if they're transitioning almost within the same job or the same role, you know, I think of my own work is about finding out what does it mean for somebody to be an accountant, and how can you make that role 100% your own. And if you can't, then that niggle has to go. You have to go elsewhere with that niggle.
Yeah, of course. And that's what happened to me, because I just struggled around the control aspect of accountancy, doing the balance sheet reconciliations, making sure the payroll accounts were clear and properly reconciled, that type of work. I was happier to do the big picture work, the commercial work.
Yes.
And I also have, no more than yourself, I also have this creative side to me, which I'm able to put to good use in my current business as a professional speaker and career coach, where I'm developing my own intellectual property, for example.
Yes, very good.
Yeah. But moving on, describe for the audience on why it is important that we set the height for our own challenging but realistic bar.
Well, certainly the research shows us, and we know this anecdotally as well, is that we are, as humans, we are wired to evolve and develop and make progress. But equally, we have to be careful that the progress that we're making and the development is congruent with who we are and what's important to us. So you mentioned, the very much that setting the bar, and you said it has to be realistic, and it has to be our own bar. And I think that, isn't it kind of time and time again, John, we see cases where that bar is set actually by somebody else, and we see either ourselves or others struggling to reach that bar because it was never the right bar for them in the first place.
Yeah, I had a great example of that in my young professional career as an accountant many years ago in the UK, where I was sent on this management development course with 9 other people. And the day before I went in the course, my then boss said to me, "John, I expect top class results from you." And we went off for 3 days to Cumbria, and I struggled with the course. And when I came back, my boss said to me, "How'd you get on with the course, John?" I said, "Not very good, Tony. I just struggled with it." He said, "I'm going to make you like that course." He had expectations of me that I just couldn't meet. And not alone was I disappointed, but he overreacted. And he was trying to set the bar for me rather than me setting my own bar as such, What does success mean for you, Anne?
It's a funny one, isn't it? In that many of us kind of grew up with this idea of success being something almost external, an external validation. But honestly, at this point in my life, success means being able to get up in the morning and know that the work that I'm doing really fulfills and satisfies me.
Very good.
And that the work I'm doing is making a difference in other people's lives as well. So there's that piece around what is it that I can offer. And for me, the successes come where what I'm offering is also meeting a need in and I say the market because I mean the market field has such a cold kind of almost like kind of a cold feel to it, but those that I want to be of service to are happy with what I am offering. And so for me, that's what makes the business a success. And maybe because I started late in life in terms of running my own business, I don't think I could have run it the way that I do now 20 years ago, John. And maybe it's part of it is age as well, isn't it? It's just that sense of I'm very clear about what it is that I'm offering, and I'm very clear about the kind of person that I am, and so when I did go to market, when I did set up creative coaching, I didn't have to do much advertising, or it wasn't a big effort or a struggle to find people to work with, because in a lot of ways I had already done that work. I had done that work already, and the business in some ways was just a realization of a lot of the work that I had been doing already. So I know that's probably a very long-winded way of answering that question, but for me, success is knowing that what I offer is of value to others.
That's a great answer. And I know what you're saying there, around that you want your business to have a purpose for you as a professional person, and you want to be able to help your ideal client to overcome their pain point. Yeah. And that essentially is success for you in your business.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. That's a very credible answer. So well done there. Explain for the audience why no one will value your work and expertise unless you do yourself.
I think this is very much the question that you've asked is one that I certainly would have grappled with early on.
Very good.
In my life, and many of the clients that I work with now, that piece around how do we value what we're doing, and because I work with a huge amount of clients in the literary world, and often they are working on a project that they don't know yet whether or not it is going to be seen as a value out in the world. If we don't really truly value what we're doing ourselves, I think we very much struggle. We struggle to talk about finances. We struggle to communicate what we're offering in a confident way, and even all of the language that we use around our business, the tone of our voice, our choice of words. If we're not clear and confident that what we're doing is of value, we will actually communicate that uncertainty and that lack of confidence to our potential clients. And so I remember in the kind of one of those kind of key points along my journey was I was offered some work in a school, and this was probably 6 years ago now, 6 or 7 years ago. And it sounded like great work. I was going to be doing some coaching, and but at that early stage, I was struggling to talk about money. So it was very much look, I'm sure we'll come to some arrangement. And when the time came, what they were offering me was so below the market price. I had that moment of, gosh, maybe I should take it, because I was still kind of starting out in the business world, and I realized that if I'd taken it, I would not be valuing the work that I was doing, and I would also be denying myself the opportunity to work with clients that would value the work and pay a fair price for it. So I regretfully, but with great relief, also turned down that particular offer. And it made a huge difference to my confidence, John, that I had stood up for the value of what I did, even though I was still at that early stage where people were saying, "Oh, you should get clients," kind of almost for this, just so that you can say that you have clients.
Yeah, I think it made a really valid point there. For any solopreneur who's going to start their own business, it's very easy to fall into the trap of taking on work at low rates for the sake of taking on work. But there's an
Yes.
inherent danger in doing that because you set an expectation for people that your rate is going to be X. If you try to raise that rate to Y, it's almost very difficult because people have got an expectation of you that you're going to do work for little or nothing. And therefore, they will see that you lack confidence in your own ability to market your skill set, to project your skill set coherently. And they will always try to undermine your confidence by getting you to agree to a low rate. So I think overall, you made the right decision at the right time for the future of your business by saying no to that particular client at the time. So well done to you.
Thank you.
I had a look at your website, tannampoetry.ie. Describe for the audience what prompted you to write about the art of listening.
So that's a poem I wrote many years ago, John. And I think in a lot of ways, it was the coaching that prompted me to write a poem like that. Because the essential ingredient to coaching is being able to actively listen.
Very true.
One of the most powerful experiences we have in life is when we are truly being listened to and being understood. And so that poem that you mentioned very much explores what I call the art, the art of listening, and what it feels like is, again, just two humans to be in a conversation with somebody, and to know that they see you and that they hear you and that they understand you. I mean, it is a incredibly powerful moment of connection.
I read the poem and it's awesome. I think it's a brilliant poem because what you're saying there effectively is, there's much more to listening than just saying, I understand what you're saying to a person, or half listening. You have to be able to get down to their level and connect with them emotionally and understand exactly where they're coming from, not to put your own thought process in the way or your feelings in the way. You have to listen actively to the person. That's what you're getting across there.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so.
Tell the audience why leaders need to take the time to reconnect and reflect.
So I'm sure you're aware, myself and another coach, my colleague coach of mine, Liz Barron. Liz and I do work under our brand Murmurate.
Very good.
So reconnect, isn't it, and reflect. And I can't remember who said this, so I apologize to whoever it is. I think they're long dead, but I think it may have been Aristotle who said something like an unexamined life is hardly a life at all. And that's now very much paraphrasing it. But if we don't give ourselves the time to step back and stop and reflect on what's happening for us and how we're responding, then we will be in an eternal loop of doing the same thing and responding in the same way over and over. So there's no room for growth. There's no room for improvement. And there's no room for stillness. And, before the show started, John, you and I were just kind of very, very briefly kind of touching on some of the difficult things that are happening in the world at the moment. And there's so little space for stillness. There's so much of what is happening around us is reacting.
Very true.
And in a leadership role, when we think of the greatest responsibility that we have as leaders is as role models. And so how can we allow ourselves that vital time? I mean, Stephen Covey talks about sharpening the saw, and it really is such a powerful metaphor, isn't it? If we don't give ourselves the time to sharpen that saw, then we're working with a blunt instrument, and it takes us a lot more effort and a lot more time to topple that tree. So at this stage, I don't think reflect and reconnect is a nice to have. I actually think, and many others, obviously, that it is an essential ingredient to the work that we do, that wherever we are in the cycle of the work, that we make sure that there is time in that process to reflect and to reconnect.
It's a great answer. I know what you're saying there, that we can't be always going at 100 miles an hour. We have to slow down the car, maybe pull in off the side of the road, take a time out to just relax the mind, get out there, take exercise, re-energize the batteries, and then get going again on Monday morning.
Yes.
Yeah. So you can't be working 7 days a week or 12 hours a day. Everybody needs a time out. Everybody needs to recharge their batteries and take care of their own personality and well-being.
Yes, very much so. Yeah.
Describe for the audience, what is systemic or systemic mapping and how can be applied in a creative context?
Well, systemic mapping is by its very nature creative, and so I trained with a wonderful company and organization called Coaching Constellations.
Very good.
Set up by a gentleman called John Whittington. And so what I learned through that is the extraordinary power of mapping what's going on within a particular system that we may be in. So if we just give ourselves a moment to think about all of the different systems that we've belonged to, we have belonged to our family of origin. When we went to school, that was another system, whether, work, college, our family now, our friends, if we belong to a particular tribe of people. And, particularly thinking about this particular show, the GYFT show, John, thinking about people who are coming from organizations and perhaps looking to set up their own company or organization. Systemic mapping is a way of looking at the reality of that system in a very open, curious way, and looking at how the different aspects of that system relate to each other and the impact that they have. And with systemic mapping, we map first what currently is. So there's this wonderful acceptance of this is the way things are at the moment, and we map what is, making sure that nothing important has been left out, even perhaps some of the things that make us uncomfortable about that particular system. And when we've mapped everything that is and are clear about the position of everything in that map, we can only then ask the question, what might be one step towards better? And with looking at that map and having this visual representation of it, we actually can discover perhaps there's some movement that we can make that will allow us to be in that system in a way that makes more sense for us.
And I'm just saying there, would you recommend, for example, that people try to make a move that's just too much out of their comfort zone? In other words, to try to fit yourself around the system. I think one of the great advantages of looking at it like that is looking at it in a systemic way is recognizing what we can change, and perhaps also what isn't ours, what isn't within our control. Exactly. So looking at it, and even the language that's used, that kind of that one step towards better. It's not about trying to change everything at the same time, because often, the word you used earlier, that's not real, that, setting the realistic bar, it has to feel realistic. The thing too with mapping is it's a very embodied experience. So going back to that creative, it bypasses a lot of our kind of linear thinking, and very much allows us to look at things from a different angle, a different perspective. All with, and the lovely phrase that's used, all with compassionate distance.
So we're not getting too involved in it. We're able to kind of step back and look at it in a very clear way.
Great answer. Thank you for that. You explained systemic mapping very well. Explain for the audience the work you do as a volunteer for Inspiring the Future Ireland.
Inspiring the Future Ireland is a fantastic organisation, and in fact, Inspiring the Future it operates well outside of Ireland. So obviously, I just work with the organisation in Ireland, and it's very, very simple, John, in that the organisation is helping children in schools and areas where typically perhaps their parents and those around them would not have had the same job opportunities or career opportunities that perhaps people in other areas might have. And so Inspiring the Future is about inviting people with a whole range of professional backgrounds to pop into schools and chat with the children about the work that they do and the route that got them to the work that they do. And so you might be talking to children who perhaps wouldn't have known that a little girl could end up being a physicist, for example, or you might end up talking where in a school where, give me example, where perhaps nobody in there. I mean, in fact, very quickly go back to my own situation. I never thought I could write when I was growing up because I'd never seen a writer. I knew I could read, but I never thought I could write because we didn't have anybody in our circle or even in a wider circle who was a writer. And, if we can't see it, we can't be it. So Inspiring the Future in a lot of ways is allowing children to see it so that they can be it.
It's a very noble cause. And well done to you for being a volunteer in that organisation.
It's very easy in that I only have to give up a very small amount of time to pop into a school. It's fantastic. The people who run the organisation are the ones that are doing the great work.
So 3 remarkable things I can take away from today's show are, firstly, in terms of setting a bar, set your own bar, but make it slightly uncomfortable for yourself. Don't try and follow other people's dreams because you could end up disappointed in life. Not alone are you disappointed within yourself. The person who's trying to create the dream for you, they can become disappointed, and that causes conflict, particularly in a working situation. Secondly, be very clear about the price and value you provide for your clients. If you have people who are trying to undermine you in terms of getting you to agree to a low price, say no, because it's very hard to increase your price at a later point in time. And finally, it's so important for any executive, self-employed, or who's working in a multinational organization, to take time out to reconnect with life, to recharge your batteries, and to look after your personal well-being and health. That's what weekends are for. We can work long enough during the normal working week. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience before I let you go?
I don't think so. But actually, you mentioned the poem, The Art of Listening. If you had a minute, I can share that poem.
Of course.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I think I might know it off by heart, and if I don't, you can always cut this out of the show. You can edit this out. So, The Art of Listening. I'm not talking about your casual, half-hearted, following the words but not the meaning type of listening that uses only one ear and the occasional, oh, I see. That type of listening is commonplace. You come across it every day of the week. Know what I am. I can't remember it. Do you want to cut that out?
We'll put a link to The Art of Listening into the video.
Yeah, absolutely, and I can pop it on a PDF. And I apologise to everybody. I haven't done that in a while, and I lost my train of thought.
You're okay, Anne. Don't worry about it. We can get this edited out of the video.
Exactly.
And a link to that poem.
Perfect.
Yeah. And on that note, I'll bring today's show to an end. Thank you, Anne.
An absolute pleasure to be here, John. Thanks a million for having me along.
You're very welcome.